Because you overwork and you overwork and you overwork, it's not going to guarantee you the promotion or the title change or the raise, and any of that stuff is not guaranteed. So why are you going to give your all to a company that's not going to give its all to you?
That won't love you back. I had to find that out the hard way.
So girl saying, let's just
look,
pour one out.
Yeah,
for
right. Here we go. Here we go. Cheers.
Cheers.
Welcome to The Next Best Thing. I'm your host, Andrea Cline-Thomas. Now, this is a podcast about creating strategies to navigate career and life transitions. And as we like to say around here, a pivot and a plan B are not required. Now, before we dive in, come on, just help your girl out and hit that subscribe button so you don't miss any other amazing episodes. Now, our guest today is L'Oreal Thompson Payton. She is an award-winning journalist and author of this great book, Stop Waiting for Perfect, Step Out of Your Comfort Zone and Into Your Power. L'Oreal, thank you so much for being here today.
Thank you so much for having me. I'm really excited.
Yeah, me too. And before we get started, we need to go ahead and give you your flowers. This is your first book, girl, yes. And you did it.
Thank you.
And as I was telling you before we got started, I got to learn more about you and your book when you were on CBS Mornings and you crushed that interview.
Thank you.
I was like, yes, go ahead. So you did such a great job. How does this moment feel for you?
It feels very surreal. There was a moment where my daughter was like writing in the book. She was practicing her signature, I guess, and signing it. And in that moment, it was like this culmination of all of my dreams and everything that had manifested and come true. We had worked for years, IVF and our infertility journey to get to her, and also years and rejections in order to get to the book. And to see both of them together, it's still, I pinch myself because it just feels so surreal and like I'm living someone else's life. And I have to remind myself like, girl, no, this is your life. That's your baby. And that's your book. And they're here together. So it's exciting.
Your two babies.
Yes,
your
exactly.
Baby and your book baby.
Yeah.
And so your book really talks about perfectionism, and you put yourself on blast. You tell your business about how you are living with perfectionism and how you're confronting it. First of all, let's define, how do you define perfectionism?
Yeah, it's holding yourself to not even just high standards, but unrealistic standards, because we know that perfection doesn't exist. We've all been sold this lie that it will protect you. It will guarantee success. It'll get you the promotion. It'll get you the relationship. It'll get you all of these things. And really it's like, no, you can be yourself, your vulnerable, flawed self, and still acquire those things and still be worthy and still be deserving of love and all of these good things. And so it's like this, it's very mental, right? Perfection and the lie that we've been told and that we bought into. And so trying to unlearn that and undo generations of harm that this lie has done to us is really a work in progress. There is no, for me, I don't think any like finish line of I've arrived and I've overcome, perfectionism, imposter syndrome, and self-doubt and all of those things. They still creep up in me even now, like haven't written a book about it, which is really, can be a little weird or awkward. But that's life and that's real and that's me and it's honest. And so that's what's important to me, is that I show up as my full, authentic, vulnerable self and hopefully inspire other people, especially Black women, to do that as well.
I was told I was a perfectionist and I was like, huh, what do you mean? So I was part of this coaching group. And and I said something, I don't even remember what it was. And the woman just matter of factly said, oh, it's because you're a perfectionist. I was like, I'm sorry, what?
Yeah, I was like, excuse me.
What, me? Excuse me?
Yeah.
What do you mean? But then I was like, well, I'm a Black woman and I'm a high achieving Black woman. And is there any other way to be? Like, do I even have room to be any other way? Like, what would you say to that?
I feel like society tells us that we don't have that room, that permission, that grace, right, to fail upward like some of our white counterparts. I'm looking at you, Adam Newman. And even, what's her name? Homegirl with the blood thing.
Yes, Elizabeth Holmes.
Yes. Mm-hmm. Yeah. A Black woman could never. And I wrote about that in a story for Fortune because I was looking and laughing, honestly, because I'm like, why am I holding myself to such high standards? And I know why. I mean, anyone who's seen Scandal or has just Black parents growing up in America, you have to work twice as hard to get half as much has been ingrained in us since even before we came out the womb, right? Like in the womb, because chances are like our mom also had that pressure that she was feeling. And that was how we were conditioned to survive and succeed in this world. And what I found out really honestly, like earlier this year is that it's a lie. It's all a lie. You can work 3, 4, 5 times as hard and still not be guaranteed that success. Now, it's also like we don't have, like I said, that permission, that grace to fail as splendidly as some of our counterparts do. And we don't have to work ourselves to death. We do not have to overexert ourselves. We do not have to push ourselves to the brink and over at the edge, honestly, of exhaustion. And so that's why in another article that I wrote about what it does mean to be a soft Black girl, there's of course, like the Instagram definition and TikTok with all the luxury. And that is great. Like y'all go get your Telfar bags. I support you. And it also means saying no, instilling boundaries, pushing back at work, not taking on 10 other assignments and doing someone else's work. I have to believe for my own like survival and legacy that I want my daughter to also believe that there is a softer way to success, that yes, hard work is important, determination, ambition, and all of those things, but you don't have to overdo it, right? Like you can have a healthy relationship with work and productivity and not push yourself to the brink. And that's what I'm hoping in this book is to share that permission slip essentially for Black women to like, okay, you can take it down a notch, right? Like, because you overwork and you overwork and you overwork, it's not going to guarantee you the promotion or the title change or the raise, and any of that stuff is not guaranteed. So why are you going to give your all to a company that's not going to give its all to you?
That won't love you back. I had to find that out the hard way.
So girl saying, let's just
look,
pour one out.
Yeah,
for
right. Here we go. Here we go. Cheers.
Cheers. It's real. It's real.
So real. So, and when did you realize that for yourself? Because look, we're in the same boat here, right? Mm-hmm. So it's just like, that you are a box checker. Like you could have defined that. But when did you recognize that maybe this is not actually serving me? Was there a moment?
I feel like, and I write in the book as far as knowing like when to switch careers, when to pivot, when to all these things, like there's a lot of mini moments, right? There's a lot of signs and different things happening. But honestly, the real like slapping you in the face, Oprah aha moment was honestly earlier this year during the performance review. And it's like, okay, I checked all the boxes. I exceeded all of the goals. And yet on the like little grade essentially that you get, because that's what it feels like, a report card, it's like met expectations. And it was in that moment that I realized it doesn't matter how hard I work, how many goals I exceed, how much traffic I bring in, right? It's always like, it's never going to be enough. The bar is constantly going to be moved. The goalpost is constantly going to be moved. And it was becoming unhealthy. Like my therapist even, she was like, I'm noticing some depressive symptoms, right? Because I was obsessed with the title and promotions and I want to advance because again, that's the lie that I've been sold is that the higher you get, the more success you'll get, the more money you'll get, the happier you'll be, the more successful you'll be, the more respect you'll earn. And that is not true. That's not the case. And you can keep going and going and going and burn out essentially. And that it's not, no job is ever worth your health, your mental health, your physical health, emotional, spiritual, etc. Like, and it was in that moment that I was like, okay, it's never going to be enough. So I'm going to choose me. I'm betting on myself and I'm going to put all of my eggs into my basket because I won't disappoint me. Like I will always like love me. I will be a soft place for me to land, and also wanting to demonstrate that for my daughter because I don't want her to have to live 35 years in order to figure this out for herself, right? That's in all the book events that I've done in different talks and everything. And I see the young Black girls in the crowd and I'm just like, yes, learn this now, like absorb this now. 16 is better late than never. Cause I also love the generational response that it's been getting from those moms. And I had a mom last week at an event buy a book for her mom and her aunties, cause it's not too late. We have to break this generational cycle of overwork, exhaustion, and perfectionism because it is not serving us.
You know, that's so good. just today, the podcast episode that's out right now is a woman who talks about the clip that I posted on LinkedIn today was about the soft life, right? And every time I post on LinkedIn, because she's a Black woman who was basically like, you know, if you're basically sacrificing everything for this luxury, then it's actually not soft. It's really hard.
Yeah.
And this is in defined soft life in a different way, right?
Yes.
And so I thought twice before posting that on LinkedIn, because I was like, you know, because LinkedIn is just a little bit more open to people who are not us, right?
Yes.
And so like it's doing great on Instagram because, you know, community. But LinkedIn, I was just like, oh, people are going to think I'm lazy. People are going to think that I don't want to, you know what I mean? Like literally going through my mind of like, they're going to think that I don't want to work and I'm freelancing and I do want to work. You know what I mean? And just like, if they see this and it comes up in an interview, like all these things are going through my mind before I hit post.
Right.
You know, of just like, and I'm just going to post it anyway because I really believe in it.
Yeah.
But it's just that cycle of the unlearning, you know, that's so hard because it's so ingrained in us overtly, either your, you know, family telling you you have to work twice as hard or subtly being told or overtly that you're not enough. This is not enough. You need to do more and more. And you're looking around and you're like, wait, everybody's not working the same.
Okay. That part.
And let's talk about more specifically how it manifested in you. And I know at the beginning of the book, you talk about the whole Peloton streak. Explain that to folks, because you were on your Peloton grind, even while pregnant, even doing the meditation, you know, to check all that the box things. Doing the meditation on the way to give birth.
Yes. Yeah. Because again, that unhealthy obsession. So working out in and of itself, not a bad thing. Taking care of yourself in your body, not a bad thing. When you are doing a meditation on the way to the hospital in order to keep your streak going, despite, you know, you're about to give birth, that's when it becomes an issue. And so for the uninitiated on Peloton, the app, essentially, you earn a blue dot for every workout that you complete. And so that can include on the actual bike. Now they have the treadmill, the row machine, or any of the exercises that are on the app, like the yoga classes they have, bar, strength, etc. And it's essentially like gold stars for adults. And that's part of what attracted me to it in the first place. I worked for a CEO at the time who also had a streak. And I'm now realizing the correlation because I'm like, well, she's a CEO and she's successful and she has 2 kids and she has a perfect streak. So surely I can keep up, right? And it's like Morgan Freeman narrated my life is like, she would soon learn that she could not keep up. And that's not the goal anyway. That's not healthy, but it was like 600 and something days into my streak when I lost it. It was just a nondescript Tuesday evening. We had been out and about all day. Doctor's appointments for my daughter, just getting her together, very much in that newborn postpartum fog. And because it resets at midnight, and at 12:01, I realized I had not logged a workout for the day. And I was just like, I failed. I cried real tears, which is embarrassing to admit because I feel like other people who are not obsessed are like, girl, it's like, why was that even a goal? And I had written about it actually in an essay for Well and Good. And my editor, shout out to Patia, was like, what was the source here? Like, why, what was it about Peloton essentially? Cause I don't think it was necessarily like Peloton. You can insert any other kind of like, you know, workout app or something. And it was a sense of control because perfectionists love control. And in a world, I got the bike right before the world shut down, essentially with the pandemic, right before we started very arduous IVF journey. And so when the world around me was literally falling apart, this was the one thing that I can control. This was an area of my life where I was like, okay, everything else can be like falling apart, but I got this. So then what did it mean when that also fell apart? Like I didn't realize at the time, and so shout out to therapy, how much of my like self-worth was tied to productivity, was tied to having this streak that really means nothing. Like, it's not like I am going to, win $1 million or something because I kept up this streak. And what's interesting is that because I follow some of the instructors on the app as well, and they don't even have the blue dot, like, streak that's, all the blue dots filled in. So what was I doing? What was I thinking? And it was kind of in that moment where after the therapy session, I realized, okay, you're still worthy. You're still L'Oreal. You're still you, with or without this streak that you have obsessed over and gone to drastic measures to maintain. And so let's redirect some of that obsessive energy and redevelop a healthier not obsession, but a healthier relationship rather with working out, with your body, with perfectionism. In that case, it was kind of like, okay, because I feel like similar to you, where it's like, no, I'm not a perfectionist. It was just like, that's the way I am. Like, that's how I operate. That's my personality. When you realize, okay, and it's also been touted in our society as a good thing to be a perfectionist. And so when you take a step back and realize, A, not healthy, B, not serving me, C, there's another way. And also I'm still worthy. I'm still the same person without all of these things. It was a real like aha moment for me.
Yeah. And I also wanted to you to talk about how your IVF journey really forced you to confront, perfectionism.
Yeah, because you can't control that. And it was very interesting because I didn't know, the only other friend I have who had done IVF that I knew at the time got pregnant on the first go. And so when I'm going into this, I'm thinking, okay, if I follow the rules, if I follow the protocol, if I take the medication when I'm supposed to, then I am also going to be guaranteed success. And what I didn't know is that that's not the case. And that's actually is fairly common for it to take multiple cycles. But again, people don't talk about these different things that do, require some vulnerability. You don't know unless someone has told you whether they've been through IVF or not. And so there's like some secrecy in that. And that's why I applaud Chrissy Teigen, Michelle Obama for being so open and so candid about it, because it's also given regular everyday women some permission to speak about it as well. And that's what I did because I didn't see a lot of young Black women, because I think that's another stereotype or like misconception about infertility, is that it's for older people. It's like 40 plus. And at the time I was in my early 30s, and it was like, no, this happens. This can impact all of us. There's, a lot of different factors that go into it, but the journey, and then it took multiple, right? Because I'm like, okay, and trying not to blame yourself in the process for it not going the way that you thought, learning a lot of patience and trust. It was definitely an exercise in faith, but it was also kind of like, you have to let go. I wrote a self article about, it was like different lessons I've learned from failed IVF cycles. And I feel like to this day, that's probably my most popular article, because I know what happens. I've been in those shoes. Someone has a failed IVF cycle. It's 2:00 in the morning. They're like beating themselves up. They feel very hopeless. They're searching Google. My article pops up. They read it. They look at me on Instagram. They see my daughter and they're like, oh my gosh, it happened for you. Like, what happened? What changed? What did you do differently? And it's like, I stopped caring. I mean, I cared, but like when we got the cycle right before she was born, it was just like, okay, we need to do this to get the insurance to sign off on this test or whatever. And just kind of like not given up, but was also not like holding so tightly to it. Was just kind of like, okay, what happens. And there's some lessons, certainly in that letting go, that I think is very important to learn as well. You can have a plan. You can go into something with a plan. You can literally do everything that you're supposed to. And it's still that perfection, that lie that's told, like, if you do these things, you'll be guaranteed success. It doesn't work in your career. It doesn't work in real life. And so you have to extend yourself some grace and compassion in the process, and really be kind to yourself and gentle, because it is hard. Life is hard. Work is hard. Trying to, conceive a baby can be hard, like all of these things. So it's about giving yourself some permission to pause when needed, and grace to, take that moment and time for yourself and give yourself that space to continue on when you're ready, I think. And that can be applicable to so many things in life.
Yeah, no, that's so good. You've talked about your therapist a number of times. Talk to me about like the process that you've been through and that you're
Hmm.
currently going through to really unlearn,
Yeah, and,
all
and
these.
it has been a process, and I'm really grateful. I'm on my third therapist now.
Mhm.
I have all been Black women, which I feel very fortunate because I know
Yes.
that's not the case to find a Black woman who accepts your insurance and has availability. So I just want to give them their kudos because they're the real MVPs, and
Right.
honestly,
They
it,
are.
they're doing God's work. And I had my first one end up moving, and then the second one, great. But I realized I needed something more in this season of life. So it was like late last year, really, when I feel like I thought, okay, she's a year old already. I should be past postpartum depression. And when I didn't realize it, it ebbs and flows,
Mhm.
just like regular depression. There's no time limit to it. And I was like, I think I need someone who gets it, who specializes in this and is also a Black woman, so understands the cultural aspect of
Mhm.
it and all the nuance, right, that's involved. And I lucked out. Shout out to Therapy for Black Girls, because it was after one of those 2 a.m., 3 a.m. crying spells where I was just like, I'm not a good mom. I'm not good enough. I don't know what I'm doing. Like really, really hard on myself, especially because, you look around at social media and it seems like everyone else has it together, but that's just a highlight reel.
It's a highlight reel.
We
Yes.
know this intellectually, and yet in the moment it can be really hard. And so I was feeling really down on myself. I went to Therapy for Black Girls. I searched for Black women therapists who specialize in postpartum depression, but also infertility, anxiety, like all of the things. And I was really fortunate to find someone who had availability and could meet with me, and something that she's been working with me on in both like career and life and family, like just all the things, is having more grace for myself, letting go of that perfectionism. And something she has encouraged me is when I find myself in these challenging situations, to think, okay, what would you want Violet to do? What would you want your daughter to do? And you need to do that, because you need to model it for her. Yes. And also you have to walk the walk, and you can't just, talk the talk. And I think a really great example of that was when we were in Hawaii last year. We were hiking up a volcano, a hike I have done before effortlessly, but a little bit different, with a 20-pound toddler strapped to your back. And we were at the next to last summit, and I could see the top and I couldn't make it. I was just like, I'm tired and I'm not going to push myself. And so we turn around, we sit down, the rest of my family is like at the benches, they're waiting and everything, give the baby to my daughter, like catch my breath and get some water. But then I turned to her and I was like, Mommy's really tired, and it's important that we listen to and honor our body and our boundaries. Now, mind you, she's like 13, 14 months at the time. Not really, I know it's not sinking in. And it was important for me in that moment to not push myself to the brink of exhaustion, like I've seen my mom do in her career, and all of our ancestors and everyone else who is always like, you push and push and push and you go and you go and you go. And that's just what you do. I want to show and I want to demonstrate to her a different way. And so, I think about that constantly in work scenarios as well. And other things. It's like, I'm not going to settle for less. I'm going to stand up for myself. I'm going to advocate for my need, because that's what I want my daughter to do. And so it's important for me to model that for her and to do it for myself.
Yeah, something that you talk about is just about that self-talk, how it can be so harsh when you're
Mm-hmm.
talking to yourself, but having Violet be, you give kindness, well, of
Yeah.
course, to your daughter, but then to others. You
Mm-hmm.
give grace to others.
Yeah.
And so it's the idea of how would you talk to somebody else, because perfectionism has you really hard and critical of yourself, which I really like that, because I think anybody, even if they don't have a child, can think of how would you have somebody else, how would you coach somebody else through the situation with compassion and kindness? You wouldn't say some of those same things to yourself. I told that to one of my like play little sisters. I was like, you're being very mean to yourself.
Yeah.
Be kinder to yourself.
It's unfortunate too, because that's the voice we hear more often is our own, right? Like in and out, day after day, every day, 24 hours. And so, it's like, I would never say that to my sister or my best friend. So why am I saying it to myself? And I wouldn't want them to say it to themselves. So it's like, come on, let's get it together. But being kind to yourself, even in that moment when you realize like, oh, I'm not being kind to myself. And it can be very easy to berate ourselves again for not being perfect, for not, saying the right thing at the right time or in that moment. And it's like, you've got to give yourself some grace and just permission to be imperfect, to be flawed, but to still show up anyway for yourself, for your friends and your family. Like, you don't have to be some perfect version of yourself in order to be loved and accepted. Like, your real friends, the people who truly love you, are going to accept you no matter what.
But how do you know, this might seem weird, but how do you know to listen to yourself? For me, it's like certain things of like, I've had to really learn, like, no, you don't like this. Like I had to sit with myself. It's not an instinct, because I don't necessarily always have those instincts because I've been practicing it another way, for so long. So how do you, I don't know, it's kind of weird. Not how do you know when you're tired, but how do you know to listen to yourself and what your self is saying?
Oh, yeah. I mean, everyone, I feel like, has an inner critic, and anyone who doesn't listening to this, that is great. You have it all figured out and you should definitely write the sequel. But for the rest of us, there's those two kind of tracks. There's the inner critic who's whispering and can sometimes be very loud and tell you you're not good enough. You don't know what you're doing. Why are you even trying? And then there's the voice, the side of us that knows the truth, right? That knows what's a lie and what's real. And so you have to discern, okay, which voice is talking to me right now. I've named my inner critic Negative Nancy, and I know Nancy's voice because it comes up a lot in fear when I'm stepping outside of my comfort zone, when I'm leveling up in some way, when I've done something that I haven't done before, but I know is ultimately going to be good for me, right? Because she's scared. She is afraid of failure. She is afraid of not looking perfect and not presenting as I have it all together and I know what I'm doing. She's a big old scaredy cat. And I need to figure out a different voice, but I feel like it's L'Oreal. It's real me who is like, no, girl, like, you've got this, you've done this before, you have all the tools that you need. And sometimes they're in there, like duking it out. Remember back in the 90s, they have the shows, right, where it's like the little devil on the shoulder and the angel, and they're like having their own little squabble in the background or whatever. And it feels like that a lot of times because, especially for me, the criticism is still the default, right? Like, that's oftentimes the first voice and can be the loudest voice as well. And I acknowledge it. I'm like, okay, I hear you. Thanks, but no thanks. And when I can pull myself away, and this has happened even recently with the book launch, right? I look to my left and my right. I see authors who've gotten different press coverage that I wish I had gotten, or they're on this list and I'm not. And it can be really easy, again, because of social media, to compare the journey and be like, okay, I want what they have. Why hasn't that happened for me? And something that my mom has, when I was little and she would tell me, I would get really annoyed because it's your mom. But as I've gotten older, like, what's meant for you won't miss you. And so the default reaction is one of jealousy. And I can admit that because I feel like there is real power in naming our emotions and confronting them and not running from them or feeling ashamed of them. So I can acknowledge I'm jealous right now because I'm anxious and I'm overwhelmed. This is new, like all of these things. But what is true? Like, people are responding to the book. It is reaching the audience that it was intended to reach. People seem to really enjoy it so far. And so I've just kind of learned, like, in that process, keep my eyes on my own paper. What's meant for me won't miss me, and really trust that. And that has taken years of inner work, but I still slip. And I still, sometimes I'm like, I go down the spiral. And that's why I was telling people, at the onset, this book is a guide, and it's not meant to help you overcome all of these things in one go. You're not going to be miraculously cured of perfectionism and imposter syndrome and self-doubt after you read it once, but rather I want you to return to it when you find yourself, getting ready for that big speaking engagement, when you are about to, put your hat in for a promotion or a raise, when you're about to switch careers, when you're going into the job interview, and those moments to return to it. Because the goal isn't like, okay, one and done and I overcome it. But if you do, again, that's great. But more so, like, there's this spiral that we can all find ourselves falling down. And I want to catch you and help you, find and identify the tools to help you catch yourself in the middle of that spiral so you don't fall all the way to the bottom.
Yeah, I love that. I love that. And this podcast centers career and life transitions. And you've made a lot of career transitions. And I was like, do I? Oh, yes. So this part that I read, the chapter Permission to Pivot and Pause, when you said, it's page 156, what happens when the magical negress becomes a damsel in distress? For us, burnout is not some gnawing fatigue that hums in the background of our lives. We are born with that kind of tire. The danger comes when we become sick and tired. Oh, I was like, whew, let me pause. Talk about how you've navigated the transitions that the many transitions, as we were talking about earlier, recognizing that, just working harder is not always the solution. So how have you, what types of questions do you ask yourself when it's time to kind of pivot or switch courses?
Yeah, so many questions, and have switched careers so many times, which I feel like, 20-some-year-old me would have been like, oh my gosh, like, no, how could you? We were meant to be a journalist forever and ever. And what do you mean we're doing nonprofit PR? And what do you mean we went back to journalism? And it's very much about that not settling. Like my mom just retired from her career after 30 some years at the same company. Mm-hmm. And I applaud her for that. And I'm appreciative because it was that hard work that put, me and my sister through school and roof over our heads and all of those great things. And so I am appreciative and grateful for that. And I also had a front row seat to the stress and exhaustion and all of everything that came with that, and was just like, no, I'm going to choose a different way. I'm going to give myself permission to pivot. And actually, I attribute a lot of that to, and I know it's a little problematic or controversial since then, but Sheryl Sandberg's Lean In, I read back in 2013. I had been in journalism for several years at that point. And I find when I look back, I can see kind of these pivots happen when I realize I'm being overworked, underpaid, underappreciated. And it's like, I advocate and I have the receipts and everything. And they're still, like either moving the goalpost or just like not responding at all, where I'm like, I recognize my worth and I know the value that I bring to the table. And if it's not being appreciated here, I'm going to go somewhere else, right? Like I'm not going to settle. I'm not going to just be grateful, because I feel like so many of these companies, right, especially because we're Black women, it's like, you should be grateful to be here. Mm-hmm. And I know, like, miss me with all of that. And so some of the questions that I've asked myself, and I credit one of my editors that I worked with when I used to write for Zora, Christina Tapper, who is amazing and brilliant, had written this. Wait, I didn't finish the Lean In thought. Let me go back.
Okay, that's fine.
That's my brain. It's just like here, and here. So in Lean In, Sheryl had written about how, you can approach your career and success in terms of a jungle gym, because so many of us look at it as a ladder, and especially in media, because there literally is a masthead for you to climb to get to the top. And what I found, the closer that I got to the top, I was like, wait a minute, is this even what I really want? I like writing. That is my passion. That's my love. That's what I really enjoy doing. When you're executive editor-in-chief, they're not really writing, right? They're in a lot of business meetings. And I was just like, had to really get honest with myself, like get quiet and get still and ask, like, is that what you really want? Do you want the title? And I did. When I set off in my career, I wanted to be editor-in-chief of a teen magazine or Bust. Like that was the goal. Mm-hmm. And yet, the closer I got to it, the more I was like, I don't know if that's really it. And being honest with myself, giving myself permission to pivot in that arena. So that's when I did go to nonprofit PR and worked at a nonprofit for girls. And because my work husband, Pedro, who I love, was like, the method can change, but the mission doesn't. Mm-hmm. And so for me, the mission has always been to uplift, encourage, and inspire Black women and girls. How that looks has been a little bit different throughout the years as a journalist in PR and communications, back to journalism, now as an author, as a speaker, but staying true to my mission and my purpose, what I know I'm on earth to do. You can't go wrong when you're true to yourself, but we have to get quiet. You have to get still. You have to take those moments to reflect, because there's a lot of noise out there. There's a lot of critics, sometimes our own, but sometimes well-meaning family members, your spouse or partner, friends, etc., people who are afraid for you, right? If you make this change or this pivot in your life. But what I encourage people to do, and then going back to Christina's article that she wrote for Pointer, she talked about the 3 W's and wait, work, and then walk. And so in some of those situations, I know I've done all of the work, right? The receipts are there, the accolades are there, and you're at the performance review, you're up for the raise and whatever else. And for some reason it doesn't happen. And you try to figure out, okay, how can we make it happen? That's when you advocate and you wait to see what happens. Give yourself a certain time frame. And when it doesn't happen, be prepared to walk. And I think that's where sometimes, fear of failure, fear of doing something differently than the rest of our family. Like, I'm the only one that I know of who has done like freelance writing and different things like that, has taken those risks in my career, who is a creative. And so that's where we can get a little bit afraid and not take the next step, the last step, which is walking away from whatever that opportunity is. But you have to believe and trust that you have everything you need to succeed, and just really walking out on faith in those moments. Of course, yes, make sure you save up, if that's something that is a possibility, but also your health is important. And that's when I go back to my therapist, who's like, I'm noticing some depressive symptoms. I saw a LinkedIn chart the other day that talked about the 12 stages of burnout, and recognized that I was at a strong 11.5.
Okay. You were there.
I was there. And so what am I going to do differently? What am I going to change? And how am I going to take matters into my own hand instead of being waiting to be rescued? Because no one's going to rescue Black women except for us. We'll help each other, but no one else is going to come and do it for us. And so it's up to us to do it for ourselves. But when we do, we give permission to everyone around us to do the same, because I talk about growing up, I didn't see Black women taking these types of risks, like in my family and the people that I knew. And now that we're all, adults in social media, we have found our people. But it's important that we be honest about what that journey looks like. It's not all roses and rainbows. And here are the hard parts. And I still know that it was worth it to make a change for the sake of my health, my mental health, and my sanity overall.
How is the pitch for you to get into all these different arenas? Because that's where I am right now. So I was local news for, over 15 years. And then I produced a show, and I'm working in all different kind of things right now. I'm freelancing. Yeah. But I would like to write more, and I would like to write a book eventually. And, how do you pitch yourself when it's the jungle gym that this year Sheryl Sandberg's book talk about, and not the ladder? Because I feel like people expect the ladder, and it's just like, no.
The ladder is not serving us. And there's a different way. And I just think about the through line, like what has always been true in all of these roles. I've always been a storyteller, no matter if it's in a newsroom or a nonprofit. I've always been about uplifting Black women and girls, whether, again, it's in the newsroom or a nonprofit. And that mission has stayed the same, even though how it looks and how I approach it, how I execute it, has looked differently throughout the years. And that honestly has really served me, because each role, and I'm grateful for every opportunity, because I learn a lot. I meet some amazing people, and each one kind of informs the next stage, and it all works together for the greater good, right? And so it's telling that in the bio and your resume, whatever. And I'm also a big fan of outsourcing, right? I'm a writer, hate writing my own bio. Hate it. Absolutely hate it. And so I paid a friend to do it. Shout out to Anuli, because I was just like, listen, and also because it's like our friends will hype us up, right? Because we can tend to be very humble and downplay, our achievements and everything. And I remember she had called me when she was writing, and she was like, this is the longest one I've ever written, because you've done so much, but not shying away from that. And I think putting it all on the page and telling a cohesive story, right? It's all a part of your story. And that's what people care. People care about people, and we care about each other's stories. And so I think we're getting to a stage where the ladder is mattering less and less, because everything has blown up with social media and remote work and everything like that. And so it's less, singular and less, of that like straight up and down trajectory. Cause there's been a whole pandemic and there is still a pandemic. People are, their priorities have shifted, but I think being honest, being your full authentic self and figuring out what is the story that I want to tell and owning it. Right. And making sure that you have that power and that you're not allowing other people's opinions to, diffuse that message.
I love it. I find that to be really, really helpful. It helps me focus. The last segment is I call ACT UP, ACT. Those are my initials. And so, so if somebody is really, I guess, what is your advice for somebody who's dealing with perfectionism specifically? How can they kind of get out of their way to get from where they are to where they want to be?
Yeah. Make a mistake, mess up something, right? Like, okay, I didn't get this recipe exactly right. But it's okay. I can like modify it, or I didn't do this project perfectly. It's okay. No one died. Like giving yourself some grace and permission to make small mistakes, right? And you can work yourself up to the bigger part of it. If you happen to have a Duolingo, Peloton, Bible app streak, even like, if you miss a day, don't beat yourself up, but it takes practice, because I think the default is like, oh no, I missed this, I messed this up. And that negative self-talk, you can really start to berate yourself, but taking a beat, pausing. Did anyone die? No. Okay. Well, let's keep going. Like it's not a matter of life or death, unless you're a surgeon or something. In that case, don't disregard everything I just said. I'm sure you have your own rules to follow when that happens. But for most of us, these situations, these mistakes that we make, it's not a matter of life or death. If you're a parent and the school bake sale's coming up, you don't need to make something homemade and prove yourself. You can go to the store and get some dessert and call it a day. It's giving yourself permission to show up less than perfect, because that's what it does for other people and parents in that case as well.
I love it. Yeah. L'Oreal, your book, beautiful book. Stop waiting for perfect. Step out of your comfort zone and into your power. How can we support you and follow you and all the things? We'll put a link to your website and stuff.
Everything's at ltinthecity.com. You can purchase the book wherever books are sold. The audiobook is out today officially, which is exciting. And if you want to keep in touch, I have a weekly motivational newsletter, and you can subscribe at ltinthecity.com and follow me on Twitter and Instagram at ltinthecity.
Love it. Thank you so much for being here. Thank you so much for loving us so well. Thank you so much for sharing your life, because it just provides us with a guide. It really, really does provide us with your guide. And also thank you for just being so conversational. I know you talked about before about just like trying to find your voice in writing this book, and it just was so relatable and so conversational. So thank you for that as well. And we wish you much success. We'll put all the stuff, all the goods in the show notes.
Thank you. Thank you so much for having me. I'm excited to share. This was a great conversation. Love that we both stood up in our red. So this was a great way to start the day. Thank you so much.